are faced with inefficient, unhealthy, and not enough housing options today. So really quickly, I'm just going to go through some basics to set some context, and then I will introduce and turn it over to some great speakers that we have today. So what is energy burden? So energy burden is the percentage of gross household income spent on energy costs. Energy costs consist of payments for power amenities like lighting, heating, air conditioning, or anything that requires any sort of energy input. Low-income households face a median energy burden of 8.1% nationally, over 3 times higher than the non-low-income household median burden of 2.3%. Energy burden disproportionately impacts Black and Brown people and directly links with other issues, including inefficient and/or unsafe homes, high eviction rates, and negative health outcomes, all of which can be tied to historic redlining practices that compound burdens on communities of color. Inefficient housing conditions place additional stress for low-income households who are folks who are already making less money or having to pay more for energy cost because they're living in inefficient housing where they're having to like run the AC more, run their heat harder, because the windows are old or there's additional issues in the household. So this is causing additional strain. And according to the Virginia Poverty Law Center, a low-income household spends on average $1.23 per square foot, whereas non-low-income households will spend 98 cents per square foot. So again, that's the low-income household paying $1.23 and a middle to upper income household paying 98 cents per square foot for their utilities. So what this means for low-income families: excess financial strain from electric and heating and cooling can often lead to tough decisions of choosing between costs for basic needs, such as food, medicine, clothing, and housing payments. So you've got people having to make choices between, life-supporting services like air conditioning and heating during certain seasons, and especially with climate change, and, potentially facing evictions or houselessness because of inability to pay. So this is a very critical issue. So I'm going to encourage everyone to be mindful of any questions you have and put them in the chat or the question and answer spot. We are going to have open time to field those after our discussion from panelists. One quick technical thing. Paige, are we able to make LaFonda a panelist? She is on the call as an attendee. LaFonda, is that you?
Yes, she's the 434 number.
Okay.
She's on the call, and I'm just looking to see if we can make a phone number a panelist. But I will look into it for sure and let you know. I'm talking to Hunter to see if Hunter knows as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
I see that LaFonda is up here and not muted. Thanks for your patience, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
I'm going to stop sharing my screen momentarily. Okay, so let's jump into questions from the panelists. So I'm going to introduce Lavon. Lavon Pledger is 36 years old and has 2 teenage kids. They live in Young Terrace public housing in Norfolk that dates back to the 1950s. Lavon is a housing justice activist and has participated in environmental justice work in Norfolk.
Hi,
Thanks for
everybody.
thanks for being with us.
Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect.
Great. All right, so I'll jump right into it with questions. So my first question for you, Levon, what has living in public housing been like?
Ooh, that is a very loaded question. It definitely is an experience that it takes a strong will to live in public housing, especially now, when not that our energy crisis or high cost and energy bills isn't necessarily the most important issue. It's a very big issue. However, it's not always the first thing on everybody's mind. It's definitely, most of the time or quite often it's unsafe, it's unkept. There are plenty of maintenance issues, and it can burden you with just, being a place where you and your family want to seek refuge and you can't, or you want safe living conditions and you can't get that. You want to be able to pay your bills in a timely manner and on time, and not have to expect the high energy costs and those national statistics you just pointed out. That is very eye-opening for people in communities like this, and like mine, especially where we just have so many problems, and it just seems like they fall on deaf ears. And it's definitely an experience I don't recommend to anyone. And if you can avoid it, please do. So, I mean, it's definitely something that takes a certain type of individual to kind of stomach and persevere through, and say nevertheless, you keep pushing. So it's definitely an experience that makes you stronger, tough skinned, and it's not for the light of heart, for sure.
Yeah, thanks for that honest answer, Levon. LaFonda, are you able to speak? I don't know if we can hear you.
Yes, I'm here. I had unmuted the first time, but someone had muted me back.
Okay, great. Well, we can hear you. Yes, we can hear you. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is LaFonda. She lives in Richmond. And LaFonda, I don't know if you wanted to introduce yourself further.
Well, my name is LaFonda. I'm the housing organizer for Legal Aid Justice Center in Richmond. I reside in low-income public housing in Richmond, me and my 6 kids.
Great. Thank you so much for being with us today. So did you want to share with us what your experience living in public housing has been like?
So my experience in public housing has been excuse my language, but absolutely hell. I have been lied to numerous times over and over with false programs that they have. They claim they're supposed to help me better myself, to move me and my kids out of public housing. They're moving me from apartment to apartment that has worse conditions. Apartments are filled with roaches. Apartment I'm living in now, I have an infestation with mice. For the last month and a half, I have been catching at least 6 to 12 mice a day. It's driving me crazy. I was scared of them. I left my residence. They had us in a hotel for 3 months. They did absolutely nothing but just repair my floor. We came back. I'm still dealing with the same issue. So now I just decided that I have to face my fear, and I have to be my own exterminator, and I have to eliminate these mice out of my house to make me and my kids feel comfortable and make my house livable, and as good as I can get it for me and my 6 kids until I can find someone that's willing to help me and my kids with home ownership.
Gosh, thank you for sharing. that. Um, so, Levon, what is the situation with your utility bills specifically? What are those costs like? What is the heating and cooling situation, gas situation in your where you live?
So I will say that before, I guess, a recent change that we had as far as gas, you did mention that. We used to have gas stoves in our units. They switched, I guess they converted them a while back into electric. And now our homes are fully electric in my community. And quite honest, it's a terrible experience because there's no central heating or cooling. There's like base heaters that require hot water and all that good stuff. But even then, many days throughout, like I live in Norfolk, Virginia as a whole, the weather is confusing most of the time. You don't know whether it's going to be hot, or cold, or from one week to the next. And my assumption is, or my understanding is that when the temperature outside gets below a certain level or degree, I want to say maybe 70 something, the heat comes on. And there have been days where it has been humid, hot, and sticky, and the heat is on, and I've got to run my AC just to keep it cool in the house because I, go to touch the heater. I'm like, it's warm in here and it's freaking hot, or the thing is on and it's been on for a few days. So, and we don't even control that. That's not even anything that I can do to turn it off. There's no switch, no button, no knob. It all comes from, I guess, a central plant or a central area up the street where the rent office is. And it is just out of control most of the time. I have to have ACs in about every room in my house because of the way the way the walls are set up. They hold everything and then they don't hold anything at all because of the way the windows are. They're drafty, there are holes everywhere. Honestly, I'm surprised I don't have a rodent problem. To be honest, it's drafty. And the utility situation is you have a certain allotment every month. And if you go over that allotment, which is not much by far, you get charged that access. And I lie to you not, I have had at least a year's worth of excess utility bills just based on that situation where I cannot control the heat or cooling. And it is terrible. I don't like it. And I wish that we could change it, fix something, move, destroy them. These buildings are old, ancient. I mean, we're talking from a Jim Crow era building, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if these buildings are older than my mom, or older than most of our parents. They're definitely ancient without any updates, as far as I can tell. I mean, there's nothing new in here. So, yeah, that's a situation.
LaFonda, would you like to share about what your experience with utilities and what your utility costs are like?
Well, I haven't really had any bad experience with the utilities, but I have came across a lot of residents that have been experiencing issues with utility bills where for an example that one elderly lady, she lives in a 1 bedroom and everything is on one unit. Every month her utility bill runs her everywhere from $150 to $200. And when she went around and did her own report to see what's going on with the utility bill about the neighbors, she found out that her utility bill was being a lot higher than residents that was having 3, 4, and 5 bedrooms. And she wasn't understanding that they have upstairs and downstairs, and she's paying $100 to $200, and they're paying like $50 or $25, or they're not going over their allowance, so they don't have a bill at all. And she's only in a 1 bedroom unit. But I haven't had no issues at all with mine because I work so much, so I'm rarely at home. So nothing is really on in my unit unless I'm there.
Okay, thank you for sharing that.
But I just don't understand what they consider affordable housing and how do they do the calculation with this affordable housing, because it's really not affordable for no one. And every time you get a raise or you get a little bit of money or you try to get an extra job to help you, like it's like everything that you're bringing in, they want to take it from you. So if you have to take all of your money that you're making to pay rent, like what are you living off of? How are you supposed to come up? How are you supposed to better yourself if they're not giving you the opportunity or the chance to save your money?
Yeah. Yeah. So the next question, do you think that there are enough options for healthy, affordable, low income housing? I know Lavon has been answering the questions first mostly. LaFonda, are you interested in responding to this first?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think that there are enough healthy, affordable housing options for low income people?
Oh no, it's not at all. And like I was just saying, what they consider affordable is really not even affordable. Who is it affordable for? Because with affordable housing and any type of affordable apartments, if someone doesn't have an income, how do they expect for them to pay a $50 rent with the light bill if they have zero money coming in? 0 plus 0 equals nothing. So how are they expecting people to pay rent and they have nothing come in? And then they want you to try to lie and have you fill out a paper saying that you have people giving you gifts and contributions to help you with buying toiletries or giving you money. Like if you don't have no support system and you don't have absolutely nothing, it's like they try to make you say that you have something so you can pay them something and you don't have it. So like that's why a lot of people be in a predicament where they facing evictions and they're getting put out for a $50 rent because they have no income, so they can't even afford the $50 for rent.
Vaughn?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely have to agree there. And one point that I love to make this, and this just makes sense. Things don't cost as much as they used to. In fact, everything's expensive. You know, gas, food, everything. You know, rent, inflation has really taken over, especially now as we're trying to see our way out of a global crisis. And in fact, they just bumped up minimum wage not too long ago in Virginia. I think it's like $12. That is nowhere near enough to be able to afford anything for yourself, let alone a family. And I also like to point out that if I'm not mistaken, I am absolutely sure that SNAP program, food stamps, benefits, the food supplement, they just increased their limitations. So that means now where you could not afford, where the limit was at a certain point, and if you were even $1 over that certain income limit, you could not be eligible for food stamps. And they raised that. So now it's time, I feel like it's time to re-examine those, those lines of what poverty really looks like. I mean, because if that's the case, somebody could having to fill up your tank every other day could put you into poverty, you know, just by the gas costs and prices alone. Inflation has really taken a hold over everything, including our food, especially our food and especially our rent. There's no affordable housing anywhere. I mean, I've seen and heard of a lot of families who can't find anywhere to live because number one, you know, it's either something on their end, which may be a credit issue, or rent's just too expensive. It's too damn high. And you got to make a certain amount over the income limit, and that's just in the free market. Here in public housing or housing choice vouchers, or if you, which is formerly known as Section 8, if you have that stuff, even then you, especially if you have Section 8, you have to pay your own utilities. That means whatever cost it takes to heat or cool or gas, electric, sewage, whatever, that's on you, plus that 30% of your yearly income. And at one point it costs, I lie to you not, at one point it cost me $1,500 a month to live in my unit that is poorly maintained. I like to know what the housing authority is doing with $1,500 a month from somebody who makes, you know, who barely makes over 40 a year. That's insane. That's crazy. We need to re-examine those lines of where poverty truly is, and put some kind of stopgap on all of that stuff, because right now a lot of people are being lied to and right in their face. I literally just sat in a meeting yesterday where our city council members in Norfolk and housing authority members and people who were sitting on a advisory board didn't know which way was up or down, and it was terrible. It was a terrible experience. I had to see these people ask so many questions that we've been asking for the last 3 years, and they still don't have answers. Where, you know, a tenant can take a housing choice voucher, move away, and not have the option to move back where they came from here in St. Paul's. Essentially their homes have been taken from them, and there's so much red tape and fine lining and fine print that everybody's confused. It's just, it's bad. The housing situation is bad all over, and it's not just here, it's everywhere in the country.
Yes. Wow. It's thunderstormy here in Norfolk. It just like cracked outside where I'm at. Okay.
Same.
Gosh.
Oh, that's another thing. It's
I
gonna
hope it
flood
doesn't
out here
flood.
too. Yeah, it's gonna flood out here. So if you're listening, so you live in public housing, you better move your car right now, because this is definitely about to flood.
I know. Is your car okay?
Yeah, I trust me. I got that a lot. After so many like times where my car has filled up, literally filled up and like filled up and pooled with water at the bottom of my seats. Yeah, I learned some valuable lessons.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So our next question here, and LaFonda, you're invited to respond first if you would like to. How is this a racial and environmental justice issue?
I think it's a racial and environment justice issues because they're not really for the people. Like, they're not really trying to help the low income poverty people. Like, they're all for themselves. They're taking all this funding money and what they're supposed to be doing repairs and fixing up for us. Like, they're just doing what they want to do with the money. They're stealing it. Like, it's clear as they to see that they're not fixing these properties up and they're not doing what they're supposed to do. If they're doing what they're supposed to do with this money and what they're supposed to do for us, helping us, and they're really for us, we wouldn't be living like this, and we wouldn't have to go through these conditions that we're going through. Like, it's just not right for nobody to have to live and go through this, and they don't go through this. They don't live like that. So why should we have to?
Yeah. LaVon, would you like to speak to how you think this is a racial and environmental justice issue?
Oh, yes, most definitely. Environmental racism is everywhere, even if you can't necessarily see it straightforward or with a clear eyes view, it's there. You know, there's certain parts of the country where literally you can pinpoint heat like accumulation in certain areas of cities and counties and whatnot. And I'm pretty sure Norfolk's no different, where, you know, the lack of trees in our neighborhoods and, you know, St. Paul's is right off of a busy freeway. So I know it gets hot. Like it gets hot in those little pockets. And those, you know, and those little pockets of poverty concentration hits residents' pockets as well. I know it does mine every month, on top of the already issues that I have where I don't even control the heating in my home. Um, and you know, there are areas even in you know, North and South Carolina where people live next to like pig processing plants. I mean, and in low income and poor neighborhoods, and that's an issue too as well. It's definite. And you know, the flooding, the here in Norfolk, it floods. The rain is no joke. I would be better off investing in a boat home uh, here in Norfolk, and that's no lie. I mean, even when you look at plans, or what do they call it, resiliency plans, you know, 100 years from now, poor people don't exist. In fact, I think there was just a plan to do something about in Norfolk, Launchmount, and I want to say Colonial Place, uh, to build some sort of walls or resiliency things to mitigate flooding, and they leave us out every time. They leave us out because they do not give two farts. Like they really don't. And I would love to say the F word there, but just imagine I did. They don't care about us. And you know, the way this racially all ties in, it's systemic. It's, you know, institutionalized. It's just part of what is. And I've sat in front of a panelist interview with our planning committee. I sat there as they told me that they don't know what to do about redlining. They have no clue what to do. I sat there in this panel interview, and it's on, like, they recorded it. So I sat there and I watched them as they scratched their head, and they said, as city planners, we don't know what to do about redlining. We don't know what to do about environmental and racial issues as planners who plan, you know, what the fart is going to happen in their city. That's terrible. That's crazy. It's insane. And I sat there and I watched them. Me as a black, as a poor black man living in poverty, I sat there and watched these people tell me that they don't know how to help me. And that just blew my mind. And it continues to blow my mind because it is continuously happening everywhere I go, especially here in Norfolk. And the only response I ever get to see or hear when I ask, why is that? Everybody shrugs their shoulders and say, that's Norfolk. I don't get it. It enrages me to the point it causes me trauma. It's traumatic for me and my family, and for those who don't even realize it's traumatic. It's trauma. You know, you might even experience trauma and not even know it's trauma, but it definitely is. I don't know, man. I don't know if I took up all the time, but I could probably go on about that forever. I literally have seen political and housing authority people point fingers. You know, we have next year we have a school system that is getting ready to merge an elementary and a middle school. It went in a teacher crisis. We don't even have teachers, let alone bus drivers or any other support, prepare professionals, none of that. And I'm watching these people saying, okay, what we're going to do is push more kids into one building, because you know why? Because it's poverty. And I don't get it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that the next question is a good, a decent transition. So what changes or improvements might you suggest, or would you make or call for, if any come to mind? LaFonda, do you have any that you'd like to share?
um, we need to fire everybody that's on their team that's right now. Like, we need people that's really willing and that wants to do the job to help the people. Like, we need to bring back more home ownership classes to help people get prepared and get ready for disasters like COVID when they take places, so they can be financially stable. We need all of these programs and everything back, and we need the ones that's willing to work and help the people to get back together and get back on their feet. Yeah, have the residents taking classes, like, because we have residents that don't even know how to read. We have residents that don't even properly know how to clean, but they're getting put out for poor housekeeping, but they've never been taught how to clean. So we need things back in place like that to show these residents what they're lacking, to help them gain the knowledge and the education that they need so they can be sufficient and they can be ready and prepared for their housing and to take care of their apartment and things that they need. We just need the right people that's ready to take on these jobs, and that's not just there for a paycheck.
Absolutely. Levon, would you like to share any changes or anything you would like ask Norfolk to do, or any kind of?
I would propose this question, and I encourage anybody else who ever asks a question, and I get asked this question often, and from now on, I think I'm going to propose not necessarily what, but when. when can we make these changes, and how are we going to make them? When are we going to make these changes? And the answer to that is, since I don't have a time machine to physically go back into time and prevent some of the damage that has already been done, I feel like right now what we need is equity. We need equity in our communities. I don't need anything that services me from the human services standpoint or social services standpoint. I need money. Our communities need money. They need funding, which we are not getting. And even if we do get that class or that human service or that the resources, the classes, the education, and et cetera, it's never enough. It's almost always never enough. I think we in Norfolk, we have a human service program called People First that is supposed to service residents in Tidewater Gardens. And it's backed by $3 million a year. That is not, if you do the math of about how many, not even residents, but how many units, that's homes, not including how many people are in the units. If you do the math on those units, that's like maybe $1,000 per unit. I think, I'm pretty sure we did the math. And I want to say Tidewater Gardens has had close to it's been a little while, so my math might be off, close to 800 units, if I'm not mistaken. And that no money, that's no money at all to run a program, to help people, to lift people out of poverty, and I am so sick of this bootstrap crap. I don't even wear boots. I don't have boots. I can't afford them. So how can someone pull themselves up by the bootstraps if they don't have any to begin with? If you don't even wear socks, if you're just walking around barefoot. And it's always the same thing around everywhere you see. It's, let's throw a program this and let's throw that at people. And then when it fails, you say, okay, well, it's the people's fault. No, it's not. It's definitely not my fault. It's definitely not anyone else's fault. It's something that was built a long time ago by some really nasty people who had the power to say, okay, all the Black people live over here, all the white people live over here. The white people can get homes for houses and have equity to pass down to their future generations, but the Black people get shoved into this tiny brick apartment. And if you are able to make a living and pull yourself up by the bootstraps, we're still going to tell you no, you can't, because you know why? Because you're Black. And that's just the way it was. And it seems to me, if you just kind of fish your way through some of that stuff, it's definitely the same thing. And it's racism disguised as classism, because I'm poor now. I can't afford these things. I can't do this, or I can't do that. And that's awful. I hate it. I mean, I would literally want to get back in a time machine and rewrite history to prevent this. But since I can't, what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep advocating for fair treatment, housing policy changes. For instance, the very simplest thing that we could do to change housing policy here at the base level would be maintenance. I mean, I have to call on the phone to say, hey, my stove is broken, or hey, I need my sink is clogged. There's no online system, there's no email system, there's no way to check and put in these requests and electronically keep track of them. So the housing authority, at whatever whim they have, they can say, okay, well, okay, cool, your stove broke, all right, bye, click. And then a week later, you're like, hey, I called you guys. And they're like, no, you didn't. I mean, that's just one thing. That's one thing that we can change probably instantly that would not take a lot. Sorry, I feel like I eat up a lot of time when I answer questions.
That's okay. That's your answer is very valuable and deserves the space. Okay, so Steve, let me introduce, thank you so much, y'all, for sharing about your experience. I know that it's not easy to share about some of these challenges, but I do think it's a really important issue and it needs to be emphasized. So thank you so much. And we're going to do discussion after Steve shares. So Lavon and LaFonda, again, y'all are welcome to chime in during the discussion portion. So Steve Fishback is litigation director at the Virginia Poverty Law Center. He has worked with public housing residents for more than 35 years. He's been a member of Virginia Environmental Justice Collaborative, and Steve also served on the board of that collaborative. So Steve, if you could share some insights on what are the common themes between housing conditions in Richmond and Norfolk, as these two panelists just described.
Thank you. Is the audio okay on my end? Great. Well, those two presentations were extremely depressing and bleak. Lavon really hit the nail on the head when he used the word trauma, because the living conditions that public housing tenants have to endure is traumatic. Having one of your children screaming at the top of their lungs when they find a mice in their bed, that's like trauma. Not being able to control the temperature in your units and having to explain to your children, I can't make it any cooler in here. I mean, that's like trauma. And this is trauma that is not like isolated, it's daily. And that has an impact on everyone in the household. It makes survival so much more difficult than, people that don't face daily trauma like this in your life face. So, to me, that's the unifying theme here, is like how to eliminate trauma from the lives of public housing residents so that they can have, trauma-free lives. It's not, that's something a lot of us take for granted, but based on the years that I've, worked and spent time in public housing, that's a universal problem, not just here in Virginia. It's as Lavon said, it's national, unfortunately. So, like, the kinds of trauma that people experience, the reaction from both Lavon and LaFonda about, well, energy is not like at the top of our list. It's because all of these other things are. And it's not that energy costs are not important to public housing residents. It's just that, just dealing with my stove doesn't work. There are mice everywhere, or roaches, or other things that are just like god awful. I mean, that's what the focus tends to be on, and that's shameful for the wealthiest, or supposedly the wealthiest country in the world. So that's what I saw as some of the common themes that were discussed tonight.
Thank you for shedding light on that, and I agree with you. So what do you see as key issues in the supply of low-income housing in Virginia?
Well, there's not enough supply, and the little supply that's left has been allowed to just deteriorate because our country refuses to come up with the funds to properly maintain public housing. So, and a lot of a more recent solution to the condition of public housing has been to privatize it, which basically means turning it over to private owners who at someday they will no longer be subject to any rent restrictions. So the supply is dwindling, the conditions are appalling, and because of historic racism at the local government level in Virginia and elsewhere, public housing for Black people was, cited in some of the most undesirable parts of the city. So all of those are like, the perfect storm for just horrible living conditions. And hopefully this country will, do an about face, although my faith in it is not very strong. There have been proposals to do massive investments as part of the Build Back Better Act in public housing to rectify the literally billions of dollars of deferred maintenance, throughout the country's remaining stock. There were some proposals to spend, I think, about 80 billion in Build Back Better to do this. That would go a long way towards addressing some of the problems that Levon and LaFonda illustrated, and at the same time provide the opportunity to develop, replacement public housing that's, energy efficient and sustainable, because it was never built to be energy efficient or sustainable. And as those are, really important things for poor people, so that they know that they have a decent, safe, sanitary, and affordable place to raise their children. And when, if they're not able to escape from poverty when they become older and don't have kids, to have other housing options that are equally safe, energy efficient, affordable, and sustainable.
Very well said. Okay, so have you heard or seen instances of public housing tenants being overcharged for their utility bills?
Yes. So the way that utilities are charged for in public housing actually varies between housing authorities. As Levon just pointed out, that the heating part, I don't believe he's paying for. He's paying for electricity. But whatever there are things called utility allowances that are set in public housing, and you're allowed to consume up to a certain amount, and after that you get charged for it. The idea is that there's like a median amount of electricity that gets charged, that is consumed, and those who are less don't pay, and those who go above pay. I mean, that's the theory behind it. But frequently the utility allowances are not changed to reflect current costs. And that results in poor people who don't have a lot of money to begin with, to not be able to afford utilities. And here in Richmond in 2017, a class action lawsuit was brought against the Richmond Authority over the way it was charging tenants for utilities. And after a few years of litigation, the case was settled, and actually the Housing Authority had to return money to residents. So yes, unfortunately, public housing tenants have been overbilled, overcharged.
So in order to allow for enough time for some discussion and questions, Steve, I'm just going to ask you a concluding question here of, do you think more low-income housing is needed, and what suggestions might you have for pathways to make that happen, or what we need to do?
Yes, we obviously need more low-income housing in Virginia. I mean, we need more housing that is affordable for a wide range of people, including very poor people, which is what public housing, provides housing to. But even, more affluent people than very low-income people, they too cannot afford housing. And so there needs to be more funds allocated for the construction of low-cost and middle-cost housing. It's very simple. The political will to do that does not exist currently, apparently, but this is not just about throwing money after problems. Housing is expensive. The housing market cannot produce housing of its own that is affordable to even, working two-income people. There has to be some way to produce housing, and that is the use of government money to do so. And it is not just throwing money at a problem, it is actually producing a quality of life that everyone should be entitled to. In other countries, this is not rocket science. There are public housing, all over England and all over Western Europe, and the housing crisis that we find that exists in this country, again, not just simply for very low income people, but for working people, even making over $100,000, it's hard to even find a place that's affordable, particularly now with rising interest rates. So yes, to Mr. Chisholm, yes, this all does need to be thought out. It's not simply just throwing money at a problem. It should be, the programs need to have designs and eligibility and criteria and all of those things. But it does require money because the market does not produce housing that is affordable, certainly to the poorest of the poor, but even to middle-class people. So that's my answer to your question.
It was a great answer. Thank you so much, Steve, for sharing your insights and for all the work you've done. Okay, so now we're going to open it up to discussion and question. I know we have people in the audience who also have experience with this issue, some who don't. So I think the way this works is that if you would like to speak, you can raise a hand and we will be able to unmute you. So folks, or you can put it in the chat and I think we can unmute you as well. So if folks have comments or would like to ask questions, the floor is open.
I got a question.
Go for it.
Where do you guys pull your at the beginning when you were reading off that information? Where do those numbers come from, those statistics and whatnot?
So they come from a mix of places. I source them and we'll send send it out to everyone via email following this, and you'll be able to click on the links. But it is from a combination of the housing and urban development, like the government. And then also some from it's ACEE, which stands for the American Council for an Energy Efficient. But y'all will get those links in your inbox.
Cool. Oh, one more question. If folks wanted to get like involved with environmental stuff, how do they do that?
So I will provide contact information for both Hunter Knopfsinger with the Sierra Club and Monet Johnson with New Virginia Majority. Those are two options, but there's lots of different ways to get involved. I mean, I think that talking to your elected officials is an important component of that, starting with city council and school boards, building relationships with even your federal level, like congressional representatives. Sierra Club currently has on the calendar a meeting with Senator Mark Warner for June 27th at 1 p.m. And other folks are welcome to join in on that meeting if they have issues they'd like to discuss with the senator. So the way that you can get looped in on that meeting would be to contact Hunter. And I'll go ahead and put that info up on the screen. And I also wanted to go ahead and unmute Monet, figuring out how to do it, because I see Monet saying good things in the chat.
Hi.
Hey.
Can y'all hear me all right?
Yes.
So my original question, which I will circle back to, was about how we use projects that are pending as opportunities for more affordable housing. For example, there's one being built downtown Norfolk, 261 units, and only 8 are being allocated for affordable housing. It just doesn't make sense. And how do we make that how do we create a standard, whether it be locally, statewide, federally, in terms of requirements for these new buildings going up? Because there's no reason we should continuously be building a city that less and less people have access to. And then I kind of had a response to one of the questions in the chat, but I know I wasn't a panelist, so perhaps.
No, you can go ahead and respond.
Yeah, I was about to say, speak your mind, Mo.
Yeah, go for it. He left, I think. Kevin, I don't know if you're still here.
Well, I think just sort of for the record, the question was like, why don't we have someone here representing statewide housing authorities? Shouldn't they be allowed in this conversation? And I think the easy response to that is, why is public outcry necessary for you to have these conversations? If your job is at the statewide housing authority, then perhaps this is a conversation you should be having outside of attending this panel. Just a thought. But I know we did talk about city council and things of that sort, but like, how do we move in terms of, because I'm an organizer. So what does this look like on the ground, really getting this to happen? It's a good idea in theory, but like, how do we create the push?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm in that same place where I have just been thinking about like going to the city and being like, you need to construct this housing. Like they need new housing, they need access to affordable housing, but the technicalities of it are something that I'm still working to figure out. But Steve, I see you have your hand raised.
Yes. First of all, there is not a statewide housing authority. There is the state's Department of Housing and Community Development, but it really doesn't operate housing in the way that housing authorities do. That has to do with the way that the public housing program was set up. It's set up at the local level. There are like every, local jurisdictions have the ability to set up public housing authorities. So the way it's administered not on a state level, but on a local level. However, that doesn't mean I don't agree that some sort of statewide authority makes sense here. I do believe that my organization, the Poverty Law Center, has tried to get a state Section 8 style program going, and there's now some sort of study group that I think will be looking at it. But I mean, trying to get legislation passed in this political climate is going to be very difficult, because the people that recently got elected don't seem to view poor people as their constituents, and don't seem, a whole range of legislation, housing legislation that had bipartisan support got vetoed by the governor this year. So I'm not very optimistic that for the next 3 years, we're going to make many inroads in this area. But that doesn't mean that people shouldn't be making noise about it to try to get it on, the political agenda, because housing is something that everybody needs. And it is becoming increasingly unavailable to a larger segment of the population every year.
Hey, Steve, I have a question. So if there's no, I guess, statewide housing thing, then what would, I guess, Richmond and our Eastern Housing Authority thing, and I think it's in Philadelphia. What is that stuff? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I think what, Levon, if I'm not mistaken, what you may be referring to is to the regional office of the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. And so HUD, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, is like the central authority for the administration of the public housing program. So advocacy with HUD makes a lot of sense. The thing is that a lot of this is going to require money, which HUD does not, pull out of its hat. It has to have funds appropriated to it by Congress. So that does not mean that there are things that HUD cannot do to make the situation better. So that may be a way to focus some advocacy efforts, starting with the congressional delegation and trying to get meetings with HUD to make some changes.
Right.
That don't involve appropriations, which are made.
I'm sorry. I apologize. Go ahead.
No, I'm done.
Okay. So that makes sense to say that we need to lobby for the people who write the checks, lobby to the people that write the checks, and then to the people who use the checks for whatever they feel like is necessary. Gotcha.
Okay, Steve Hansen, let me see. I'm gonna unmute you now. You should be able to speak, Steve, I think. Wait, yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, I've been shadowing the Hampton Roads Planning District Commission, and people may not know what that is, but that's basically a consortium of all the cities and counties in Hampton Roads that meet together to try to coordinate policies. And they've recently put together a planning strategy, and part of that has housing in it. They are, I have to say they look mostly on just creating more industry and whatever. And so that's certainly important for jobs and things like that, but they don't really take an equity viewpoint. But we're changing that now and introduce something called the Equitable economic development, which is basically to take a equity-driven approach to growth. And in regard to that, they are sourcing a diversity, equity, and inclusion coordinator. And as I said, part of the strategy has to do with housing, creating, because they need more housing to attract more labor to fuel this economic engine that they're concerned about. This is going to be an issue, and I'm not sure when that's going to be addressed, but it'll be addressed sometime this year. We're really kind of waiting for the DEI to show up. We're sourcing that, and once they do, I put on the table that the start for that should be an equity indicator study, basically looking at bringing community together and see and addressing these issues, see what the community says is a big equity issue, and then trying to collect data on that. So, like your utilities issue, we would be collecting data on local information as opposed to something more general. But you know, all kinds of workforce development is one of the things I'm really worried about. There's more of a tendency to, in many regards, bring in like the military veterans and not to give our local people, specifically our people in places like St. Paul, the opportunity where it's just easy to bring in people who've come in here from the military and they're getting out and then they hire them. So, but anyway, make a long story short, if you would have you or Hunter or Monet assemble some kind of interest group that when this issue comes up in the HRDP, we could make sure that people are there to voice it. Opinion.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea to think about and something we can continue to talk about, just to let everybody know. Steve Hanson's involved with the Poor People's Campaign as well. He's great to work with. All right, I'm going to go ahead and let Vince come off mute. You should be able to talk.
Can everybody, or can you hear me, Ann?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, thanks. A lot there to kind of round and pick up. So I haven't really met anybody here yet, I don't think, because I kind of came on a little late. I apologize. Vince Hodges. I work with New Virginia Majority and former Monet Johnson, a retired Navy veteran, settled here in 2000 and just decided never to leave because I love it. And one of the things that I definitely loved about Norfolk was the fact that it had a small town appeal in the midst of kind of everything that was going on. And as I've been here over the last few years, we found a sea change in how environmentalism, progressivism, all this stuff kind of like has resonated. And it's supposed to be all in Virginia Beach, but when we found out that shit's performative, that stuff was performative and not really driving anything, the region looked to somebody to start taking the lead. And I was glad to see Norfolk kind of doing that. The thing that got left behind in all of that were that the people are the engine that are going to make the and I heard the word engine, right? Like the engine that are going to make the economic and environmental protection stick that we don't need. Mr. Fishback, what I heard you say about getting state level legislature involved couldn't be. There was a bunch of things that said, but I mean, it was really on the nose. The thing is where we're seeing this gap in state level legislation and that kind of support, we do see local legislators like Delegate Jackie Lass putting together forums where constituents can bring issues, talk to people amongst their staff, and point them towards one of the 14 committees that are being put together. If you want a law made, it's got to fall into these submit subcommittees. And Levon, you know that from city management, right? We've got boards and commissions. So I'll text you Delegate Glass's contact information, the website, and then we can talk about that offline if you want. If you want to feel advocated for at the state level, it's there for you. And that kind of push is needed if I hear Mr. Fishback correctly, and then Levon, if I hear you correctly. There's nothing in the middle, right? There should be kind of a HUD or something kind of pushing up with more directness. Well, that's the same place that the NRHA here in Norfolk operates. That ambiguity, that lack of like tenant advocacy, that's the stuff that keeps environmental social justice from uprising. So the thing is like we're finding in communities is like nothing moves before trust. It doesn't matter how righteous your issue is, like nothing moves before that. So I think more than anything, if anybody could do anything, if we talk about where people are at state and coming in or city council or anything, it's about being on the doors and shaking these people's hands, you know, and trying to do what they can. The system works the way it's supposed to. And Levon, you talked about, and I'll say this and be quiet, you talked about how they never keep us in. Well, they never include us in their plans. And St. Paul's isn't included in the current plans other than for a downtown economic driver. You know, across the bridge in Berkeley, they're not saving anything except for the shipyards. That's according to the Army Corps of Engineers plan, right? Nature fill-ins, basement fill-ins, and government purchase buys. That is redline. So it's not that they don't know what to do about it. It's like they're not going to do anything about it. They have a city plan that plans on you being eradicated. So if that pisses you off, it's the truth. You know what I mean? And I don't know whom else is on the call. Thank you for letting me speak in. But I mean, if you find your guts turning a little bit here, it's because if we don't do anything, Black people will die. And it really is that simple. So I encourage all of you to reach out, contact Mooney Johnson or New Virginia Majority if you really want to get active about this in a legislative arm, in a you know, boots on the ground kind of way where you can go and sell that shit. But basically what I mean is if you want to go hug people and say, we'll try to do something, like there's a place for all of us. So thanks for letting me speak in, and thanks for bringing on New Virginia Majority.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all so much for all of your insights. There are a lot of great people who have attended and added their perspective today. I'm hoping we can continue to work together and just like figure out how to do something about the situation and figure out finally like just strike the right angle and like finally break through because like Levon said, it's a problem that cities across the country are experiencing, and like if we can break through and have more progress in Norfolk, you know, that's important for people who are struggling, you know, across the country. So thank y'all so much. I do think that this was a heavy conversation, but there is progress that can be made, and we did a powerful, good thing by getting together tonight and thinking about this. So I just really care for you all and appreciate you all, and I hope that you have a great night. We will send you a follow-up email, and we'll keep talking about this and figure out what our next steps are, and be sure to contact everyone who registered, okay? Thank you so much. Have a great night, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Anne.
Bye, guys. Thank you. Stay dry, everyone.
Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, stay dry.
Bye.
Bye.